Hello, we're glad you're here. I'm Kris Osborn. This is the Center for Military Modernization. Very enthusiastic today. We are joined by a very powerhouse general, General Thomas Todd, Lieutenant General. He's the Chief Innovation Officer of Army Futures Command. So you can only imagine how significant that is for Army modernization and future war. We try and track this effort very closely. Let's welcome the General. Sir, it's very glad to have you.
Thanks. Great to be here, Kris.
Excellent. Well, gosh, sir, I want to start big picture in the sense of many of us have followed Army modernization for 20 years, and it really seems that the Army's kind of now accomplishing what it's long sought after. It's really a breakthrough time. I remember FCS, systems of systems, and then joint tactical radio systems, software-defined radio, efforts to do that, connecting the force in real time, truncating that sensor to shooter time. What's happening, sir? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we're excited to be on the front end of that, certainly. And Army Futures Command plays a role in that, certainly with the rest of the material enterprise, as well as the requirements community, doctrine community, organization community, all that have a play in what we do. And if you really think about it, we've gone from a fairly episodic approach of every once in a while kind of coming up with the next big idea to really persistent modernization. And that's where we've always wanted to be. We don't ever want our soldiers to have a career where they're never modernized. We actually want them to expect to be modernized and to always be trying to figure out how to use the next thing that they'd obviously give us an advantage on the future battlefield.
Absolutely, sir. Well, gosh, I have to think for those following this, what this means in a tactical sense, you have a mini drone, what do they call them? Air-launched effects, which can reach a larger drone, which can even reach a helicopter, which then goes down to the ground. How does this work in terms of being able to find and destroy a target? What used to be 20 minutes is now a matter of seconds, sir.
Yeah, and I would say it's also constant as well. One of the things that we obviously are trying to link in operational experimentation with system experimentation is the value of technology and the value chain. And you talked about one of them right there. This whole idea of everything being interconnected, everything being integrated is an extremely important concept. And until we started experiments, especially the mixing of system experiments with operational experiments, we truly never understood both, number one, the operational value that we were trying to get out of it, nor we could achieve. And we also didn't understand, quite frankly, what could be. There are so many things, yes, that we see when we do experimentation as far as seeing ourselves, but there's so much also that we learned that we could be doing. And I would say when conflict arises, that's too late. So we have to get after it. It's paramount. There's a huge sense of urgency inside the Army, hence the major institutional change to get after concepts and early technology so that we inform and actually have better chances of success of our programs.
Sure. Well, sir, with your leadership with innovation, I understand there's a real accelerated effort. One of the things you oversee is finding those instances of innovation and fast tracking them or transitioning them to the test community as well as the operational community. How is that evolving for you, and what are some of your thoughts and priorities on that?
Yeah, well, first, I'll start with the test community. We need them there every day with us testing concurrently. We don't need large capstone events at the end anymore. And as we go through developmental efforts, design and developmental efforts, we have to get better at both system level testing, operational level testing in real time. Hence the very reason for soldier touch points all along the way. If we have the right evaluators in our formations with us in real time, then we have data that we can actually action off of. As far as operational community goes, making a difference in real time is important to us. We set out on obviously a large set of Army priorities, signature efforts, 6 major signature efforts, 2 additional CFTs added at a later date, and then really what are our major 31 plus obviously 4 new long-range hypersonics and directed energy programs that are signature efforts that we continue to push to the finish line. But make no mistake about it, that's only the beginning. That's kind of breaking the ice. of what could be. And so, what we expect to see is experiments all the time throughout the year, and then us taking and making something of it. And the way that we're asking for help to do this is we're asking for budget flexibility to get beyond the tyranny of programming. If you know that whole idea of programming of dollars, that doesn't really speak to flexibility or agility. And we've had some great authorities come through in the way of software and middle tier acquisition. But quite frankly, we need innovation flexibility in front of that. And we're getting after that today as we speak.
I'm glad, sir, you mentioned a couple of instances. I was going to ask from your perspective, what are some of the examples of real promising transitions? I think of long-range hypersonic weapons. If a weapon, if I'm not mistaken, that's going to be ready or close to operational as soon as next year. And then you mentioned lasers. They're firing from strikers, at least in terms of some initial testing. How are those technologies in particular looking, and aren't they real poignant or strong examples of this whole process?
They are, and I'll give you others. But in that context of the modernization continuum, those systems were demonstrated and then prototyped in a rapid fashion in sets that helped us to not only employ it operationally early, but also to be able to evaluate it from an operational context, i.e. how the division commander and the corps commander would use those assets, or even higher in some cases. We have this whole idea that the way that it was looked at it in the past, and I think the way that many people still think of it, is there are science and technology, then there's a valley of death, and then there's the engineering and production piece. That skips the entire process of going from a demonstration, which is really what science and technology ends in, to an actual first article that allows us the ability to employ and learn at a small scale. So this idea of going from experimentation straight to scaling to a large scale is just not realistic. As a matter of fact, it doesn't survive sensitivity testing often, right? If you did a sensitivity test against the probability of success of your effort, if you failed to do the demonstrations and if you failed to do the prototyping, then you have a much lower probability of success. And we've seen that in the past. But now we're seeing great success because we are doing the demonstrations here at AFC, informing the early requirements, handing it over to a prototyping effort, and then seeing if it's worth scaling or not. Some other efforts outside of hypersonics or medium range capability and directed energy are things like other munitions, tube artillery munitions. We're going to be able to do things with our tubed artillery that we've never been, nor have any of our adversaries ever been able to do before, in the way of ranges and accuracies and lethality. And that is huge, as the chief has often stated, speed, range, and convergence, right? Decision dominance, all those things that we have to achieve need to be achieved in the way that we execute our missions on the battlefield. Certainly, Future Vertical Lift has had a great demonstration in the Joint Multi-Role Rotorcraft demonstration, and we're on the verge of transitioning out of that into that program, and that has brought down a lot of risk, and it will add speed and range that we've never had before. Other things like augmented reality, AI, and autonomy, all of those will be spinning out individual technologies rapidly, and it's all because of the experimentation that we've conducted at both Project Convergence and other operational experiments throughout the year.
Well, I'm glad you said those, General, because one of the things I understand, that's particularly Army Futures Command, and I remember General Murray, the former commander, talking about this as well, is that the technology winds up leading to or inspiring a need to adjust maneuver formations and tactics. Isn't one of the reasons for the success of Project Convergence and some of these breakthroughs is that strategically and tactically, the technology is looked at in relation to how it changes formations and tactics?
Very much so. As a matter of fact, autonomy has allowed us to take risks where we previously would have not. If you think about it, our risk tolerance has actually increased with autonomy, simply because we'll put autonomous systems in places we might not have put a human. It's just that simple. And operationally, people for the longest time were trying to understand the value of autonomy to the operational force. And that is one of the major values of it. Another thing is obviously survivability on the battlefield, right? There are huge implications for autonomous systems when it comes to survivability. Certainly, it's going to be difficult. Secretary just talked about it. It's going to be difficult to hide in plain sight, but we've got to figure out how to do that. And sometimes that does mean autonomous systems, robotic systems. Sometimes it means some other ways. But at the end of the day, I think the promise that our systems hold to influence doctrine and future concepts has been largely misunderstood for quite some time, and I think now is being recognized. And as a matter of fact, we're seeing as multi-domain operations and new doctrines being rolled out, and we are working on the next concepts beyond that doctrine. We're finding complete new ways to fight: machine on machine, human machine teams, artificial intelligence, and all the things that go with integrating those great human machine teams on the battlefield.
Well, I'm really glad you mentioned artillery, sir, because I've had a couple of fascinating conversations with General Rafferty about the trajectory or the maturation of artillery. Gosh, it went from an area weapon. I remember 2007 or 8, the advent of precision-guided artillery and something like Excalibur and a CEP of 1 meter, the ability for that kind of land precision. And now I understand that things like the shape trajectory, where you can have an artillery projectile essentially adjust course and hit an enemy target under a bridge or on the other side of a mountain. I mean, these are astronomical changes and improvements. What are some of your thoughts on those?
Well, that ties nicely to what came out of Project Convergence last year. Project Convergence last year was aimed at sensors and shooters, right? And many of those are artillery. Many of those are other. The reality is what we're after is all sensors, best shooter all the time. And so linking and integrating sensors, right? And we have certainly launched out with innovation funds on an AI program called Rainmaker, and it is getting after integrating sensors. And we're launching out, or we have launched out already on an acceleration effort of Firestorm, which is linking shooters. And so this combination of the two allows us to put the entire architecture together that needs to be there to fully sense and fully engage. Now, when it comes to precision artillery, the idea of precision used to be, GPS was considered precision previously. Now we can be extremely precise with targeting with sensors, both onboard and offboard sensors. So you can imagine the level of accuracy that we can achieve now with precision munitions. So we've completely changed the whole definition of precision. And that's gonna add value. I will tell you, one of the things we're looking at is the economic dilemma that we not only create on our adversary, but our enemy, especially in artillery and the number of munitions that are required. So what we're also trying to do is get after extremely affordable munitions. And we are finding unique ways to tackle targets, and some of them are extremely affordable. And I look forward to what the ultimate mix ends up being. We'll certainly optimize that for the taxpayer and certainly our Army and our commanders on the forward edge. But at the end of the day, we're going to be able to afford more than less.
Well, I was very interested in your reference to Rainmaker. I had the honor of showing up at the ARL and talking to some of the leaders working on Rainmaker, and the impact just seems astronomical. And on that point, I have to think of AI when it comes to the real margin of difference with increasing that speed. And with Firestorm and Project Convergence, incoming otherwise disparate pools of sensor information are organized, analyzed, and recommendations are almost instantly provided to decision makers. Where do you see that evolving, and can you get even faster if that doesn't seem possible?
Yeah, I do. I think one of the beauties of, for example, Rainmaker is it is essentially a reference architecture for us to build off of and continue to evolve off of. If we needed an AI architecture for sensors, that's it. We've chosen it. We've said that's what we're going to use to not only demonstrate, research, discover, and evolve off of, but also protect our data, right? So this whole idea of protection of data is huge. And data is almost everything to us on the future battlefield, right? It is our eyes and ears. It helps us make decisions. It helps us with targeting. It helps us with patient care. It helps us with all kinds of things. And so in the sensor arena for us, Rainmaker becomes how we talk to industry, how we talk to researchers, how we operationalize. And so we have a common foundation to work off of, and these reference architectures are becoming extremely important in our business. It is essentially the interface control document, for to use an engineering term, right? That we hand researchers. We might not hand that to engineers, but we can hand it to these designers and architects and researchers that want to go try to see if there's anything new that they can do for us. And then obviously once they work in that environment, integrate into it, then we can hand it also to the engineers to produce even greater capability. And yes, absolutely correct. Rainmaker has huge advantages. This whole idea of not having translators for every single system is big. And I think Rainmaker gets at a lot of the things that we're after, not only from an engineering and design standpoint, but the outcome that the operator expects.
Well, what's interesting about that, from what I understand, sir, is there's this gateway phenomenon where you can have software for programmable radio sensor information coming in, and then a data link or GPS, and then perhaps something through computers, and all of those different transport layer formats can be aligned and essentially synchronized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the ultimate in being a linguist, right? It speaks the language that, even though it might not be the language that the input comes in, but it definitely speaks the language and converts and is actually, that amalgamation of understanding, I guess, that needs to occur for machines, right? And that's really what we're talking about. We're asking machines to be precise and extremely efficient, right? And then let the humans come in and be adaptive and intuitive and decision makers. It's funny you mentioned the gateway there, because we actually named our entry point for Project Convergence new technologies, promising technologies, as our gateway experiment. And that will occur immediately before, or actually simultaneously against the same scenarios of Project Convergence. So we'll be looking at all kinds of new gateway technologies, not just in Rainmaker.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, gosh, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the broader trajectory. I showed up at Project Convergence in 2020, and I know the Army's very joint in its focus. And at that time, there were F-35s sharing information in real time with ground units. And then there was more multi-domain focus. And now I guess this year there's even NATO allies who will participate. How is all of that maturing? And that seems extremely significant when one thinks of the Pentagon's vision.
Yeah, we always say 10X. Well, it's really 10X this year. PC-22 is getting after JADC2 and integrated fires. That's with the Joint Force and Coalition partners. So you're exactly right. We have numerous coalition allies there, all throughout the West, and in support of U.S. Army Pacific, which is the headquarters for really the experiment. And ultimately, it'll occur out at National Training Center. It'll occur at Camp Pendleton. It'll be all over,
Did we freeze up, sir?
Okay, let's see if it reconnects.
Oh, hey, there we are.
Okay, did that reconnect?
I hear you, sir. Yes. All right. Here we are. You were in the middle of a thought, sir, and then we had that's probably on our end, a technical glitch. Please go ahead.
No worries. Yeah, it is truly going to be, the 10X experiment that we always wanted. In a way, it gets after both current technology and integration of it, as well as new technology. So it's hugely promising in the areas of JADC2 and informing the Joint Force on JADC2. The Army's not the lead on JADC2, certainly the Joint Force and will lead us in that regard. But we wanted to be able to inform that and the integrated fires piece from the land component perspective. And that's what Project Convergence 22 will do this year with both joint coalition.
Well, naturally, there are threat equations in both Europe and the Pacific. But I read a study not that long ago that the Army's footprint in the Pacific is larger than some might expect. That there really is a role, not that there ever wouldn't be. But from what I understand, is some of the training and preparation just looking at the different theaters and something like how the Army might support a joint mission in the Pacific.
This one is certainly geared towards that. Obviously, we're looking at a maritime scenario in which certainly, there's non-contiguous lines of supply. There's all kinds of island issues and range and geometry issues that theater and that theater only really can provide. And I would tell you that it's a whole different equation. Whether the Army has a role to play, I think obviously we do. You can look at history. And the Army had certainly a very large number of soldiers in World War II in the Pacific. But interestingly enough, deep sensing, all the things that we'll do with allies and partners that are already in the region, that almost all are led by Army leaders, oh, by the way. And, we will obviously play a huge role in contested logistics as well. Contested logistics or joint logistics is the Army's business. We provide logistics for anybody that's on land, and we obviously take that role very seriously, and how we're going to both not only get things to the front lines, but also distribute them, because as you know, our troops will operate in a much more dispersed manner in the future.
Sure. Well, gosh, sir, I'm sure yourself and many others, everyone's watching the evolving situation in Ukraine. And one of the things that caught my attention was the Marine Corps Force Design 2030 talked about becoming lighter, more expeditionary, more deployable, in part because of what the world has observed, that dispersed and disaggregated operations, ambush hit and runs, anti-armor weapons can have a great impact or successful effect against a heavy mechanized unit. Now, of course, there's a place and a need for force on force, heavy mechanized training and preparation. But as you look to prepare the force for the future, how is some of that influencing some of the thinking and some of the training?
Yeah, we are definitely learning from that. I would say Europe is a little different fight, and we're seeing that unfold. The types of systems that you would encounter in that type of fight are certainly different. I don't want to go into too much detail about what we are learning, but the reality is advanced technologies we see clearly have a role to play and can create a decisive advantage. And we see what happens when an adversary might not have that advantage anymore. And I think there's been great successes, not only because of certainly great leadership and tactics on the battlefield, but technology certainly has had a role to play in Europe, and we're learning from it each and every day and integrating that into our experiments.
Doesn't surprise me at all. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you mentioned a couple of other programs. We could talk for an hour about each one, but you mentioned FBL, and I think there's still source selection. So I know there's not a lot of detail or information about a competition you can address, but in terms of the paradigm changing, both attack, reconnaissance, and utility helicopter, what will this bring to the force? It's been needed for generations or decades, you could argue.
Yeah, I'll harken back to some of the I guess the mission vignettes and scenarios that we looked at in the past, and when it comes to the maneuver force, it's really important you be there before your enemy. Mm-hmm. And technology can help with that. Speed matters. Certainly survivability is something we always have to work on, and speed can aid in that as well. But being inside, to use an old term, the OODA loop, is big. You have to get inside your enemy's decision cycle. And one of the things that Army Aviation does for the land component is it helps the maneuver force get there and do that. And I think whether it's sensing, whether it's reconnaissance missions, whether it's air assault missions, and the speed at which we do that, the ranges at which we do that, if we're ever comparing ourselves to our adversary and really there's no decisive advantage of our air assaults over their air assaults or et cetera, other missions, then shame on us, right? Because we all, especially if technology would allow for it. And so I think the beauty of, where the Army's going with Future Vertical Lift is dedicated to getting after air reconnaissance where it needs to be, and certainly moving in our maneuver force where it needs to be in a timely fashion, so much that it creates an advantage for our force and a disadvantage for our adversaries.
Sure. Well, with all these breakthroughs you're talking about, it reminded me of a few conversations I had with General Kaufman, and I'm sure you have some real insight on this, sir. This notion that traditional combined arms is really evolving toward a newer idea of what combined arms will look like moving forward, in part because of how these technical breakthroughs impact the tactical equation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it gets back to human-machine teams. If you think about it, not only multi-domain takes air-land battle to a tenfold degree, and many more domains operating simultaneously, right, together. But human-machine teams and how they work together on the battlefield is paramount, and that's one of the major things we're experimenting with, whether it be air, ground, software, you name it, systems, subsystems. In real time, we are trying to understand exactly how they could be optimized to work best together. Because if there's one thing we know, human on human versus human machine generally prevails. Same thing with machine on machine. Human machine generally prevails over that as well. So there's plenty of other analysis of this all the way back to IBM and chess and certainly game theory and some of the other ways of looking at it. But make no mistake about it, this is no game we're in. We're in the business of life and limb, and we cannot get it wrong, or we have to get it at least less wrong than our adversary. And at the end of the day, we're not going to be perfect, but I think the experimentation we're doing in real time with these new concepts allows us to have a much better chance of getting it right.
Kris, let me interrupt real quick. Sorry, there's about 2 minutes and 45 seconds left on the Zoom window. Just want to let you know.
Thanks for telling me. Okay, last question, and then we'll do a quick wrap. 3, 2. A lot of people, it's kind of a jazzy topic, sir, but a lot of people are interested in the future of the Abrams and heavy armor. Then I recall a conversation I had, I believe it was with General Kaufman, about conceptual work on optionally manned tank, and that next year being really the time when decisions might be made about what kind of platform or technology might be thought of. And at the same time, you hear, because of the role for heavy armor, the Abrams isn't going anywhere. So what are some thoughts you have about the thinking and the progression of what a future tank-like vehicle might look like?
Well, I will certainly, he's the expert coming from NGCV, CFT, and working on that. Armor technology is difficult. It just is. But to think that there's no place for armor on our future battlefield is kind of a misnomer. And I think we've seen that disproven, quite frankly. We've seen in Eastern Europe to date the misuse of armor, and we've seen the appropriate use of armor. And again, it gets to, are there options for human machine teams? I think there are. And that might be a human that's not resident inside any platform, air or ground. I would leave it to him to discuss the details of that further, but suffice it to say, we are on the way and we're already experimenting with air and ground robotics vehicles.
Excellent, really critical insight, and a tremendous honor for us at the Center for Modernization to hear from you, General. Lieutenant General Thomas Todd, who is the Chief Innovation Officer of Army Futures Command. Thank you, sir. Absolute pleasure to talk to you. Really important stuff.
Yeah, Kris, it's our pleasure, and we're excited to be here, and we look forward to seeing change at a pace that we haven't seen it before. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.